Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarvagurubhyo Namaha. Offer respects to all my teachers. We're continuing on with Hari Bhakti Vilas, the fifth Vilas, and we've come up to the stage of external worship. After doing all of the preparations for worship, we now have done the internal worship, the mental worship, the Manasika Puja, and we're going to now talk about the external worship. So in the external worship, we'll just cover that quickly. We discussed last time about all the different upacharas that are offered to the deity. And we'll see now, we'll continue on with the main text of Hari Bhakti Vilas. So here we have text 249 and 250. We did this, I think, the last lesson. Bahya Puja. So the process of external worship. This is, O Supreme Lord, O my Master, please give me permission to engage in your external worship. And I think we noted here that there was the word iti. Iti indicates, the word iti means thus, and it indicates in Sanskrit that there is direct speech. So this actually should be chanted as a mantra, at least part of it. Anugyam Dehi Bhagavan, Bahir Yage Mama Prabho, and Sri Krishna, I guess. Ityanugyap Yapya, give permission, right? Anugya means give permission for me to do samacharit. He is going to perform the external worship, taking permission. Say, after praying like this, one should begin worshipping the Lord. There are many forms of the Lord, such as the Shalagram Shila, or the deity. And if we look in here, it mentions the word Shalagram here. It also mentions Murti here. And it mentions Puja Stanani, which means there are different places to do that, or different icons that are used in the worship of the deity. We'll see that may come up coming up soon in some slokas. Okay, so continue on with. So there are many forms of the Lord, such as Shalagam Shila and the deity, so that the devotee can worship the Lord externally. So now text 251. What are the puja stananis? What are the places? See, mentioned here in this last verse, 250, puja stanani. Now we're going to define what the puja stanani is. So we know the internal worship happens within our mind, which in Sanskrit culture or Indian culture is the heart, is described as the heart. So we describe the soul and the super soul are there within the heart, and so the internal worship goes on. We meditate upon it happening in the heart. So that's the place for internal worship. The heart or the mind, we can think of it as the mind also. And so where is the external worship going to happen? That is going to be explained next. So what are the puja stananis? What are the puja stans? The forms of the Supreme Lord one can worship. This is going to be a big topic, right? So from the Samohan Tantra, which is obviously a tantras deal with ritual activity, ritual worship, right? It says, one should worship Sri Hari in his form as the Shalagram Shila, as a mantra, as a yantra, as a sanctified altar, and as the deity, but one must never worship the Lord on the ground. Okay, so let's look at the Sanskrit here. Shalagrame, in the shalagram. It's locative case, it means in the shalagram. We should worship the Lord as manifest in the shalagram. The shalagram is a movable, small stone from the Gandaki River in Nepal, and it's considered to, and has sometimes got these markings that look like a disc, like a discus of Lord Vishnu. So these are considered self-manifest deities. It'll be described a little bit more later on. So in the Shalagram, and the Lord, there's no pratista, there's no invocation needed, no ritual meant to call the Lord from our heart or from Vaikuntha or from the Surya Mandala or wherever we call him from to come and to reside within the Shalagram. He's already there, considered to be in the Shalagram eternally. So the Shalagram is mentioned first here, by the way, right, which is interesting. So the Shalagram is mentioned first. It's primary place for worshiping the Lord. Secondly, we talk about in the mantra. Right, I'm not sure whether this is a spelling mistake, whether it should be mantrao or manao. I'm not sure, but anyway, in the mantra, the Lord is manifest also in a mantra. The Lord can be worshipped externally in the mantra. Now, a mantra can be shown in physical form also. A mantra can be shown in physical form by writing the mantra, and it can be written in different scripts. Sanskrit is written in there are mantras in some other languages also. In Buddhism, they have Japanese mantras and things like that. But and even in Latin, there are some mantras, right? Powerful hymns or powerful spells, we can call them magic spells. But specifically, when we talk about mantra, normally we're talking about a Sanskrit verse or a Sanskrit set of letters, and they can be written out. And the normal script that Sanskrit's written in is, of course, the Devanagari script nowadays. But in different parts of India and different parts of Asia, Sanskrit is written, whether in Hinduism or Buddhism, is written in different scripts. So there's nothing wrong. Like, for instance, here we use the Roman script and we use some diacritic marks to show the proper pronunciation. So if we want to worship the Lord in a mantra, it's possible to do that, even in a solid form. So maybe two-dimensional, or it might even be three-dimensional if it's possible. Then we have the word yantra, in a yantra. Now, what is a yantra? Now, yantra is usually, there are yantras, there are mandalas. Mandala is a little bit different from a yantra. A yantra is normally a geometric pattern, normally an 8-petal lotus within a six-pointed star within an 8-petal lotus within a rectangular set of 3 boundaries with gates in the north, south, east, and west, embossed on a metal object, or a metal plate, let's say, usually of copper, but it could be gold, it could be silver. It could be written on paper, and this yantra is this particular design. It's not always, of course, it's not always a 6-pointed star within an 8-petal lotus within, but very often it is. And then many times, mostly, it has also got the letters of the mantra, which are written out in a certain order and placed in certain places on it. That is also considered to be non-different from the mantra, which is also considered to be non-different from the deity. I think when we were meditating on the Guru Parampara, when we were meditating before we did the puja, we meditated also on the mantra, and we meditate upon the deity, Lord Krishna in this case. We're using the Astadashakshara, the Gopal mantra, is non-different from the mantra. So Lord Krishna's Gopal is non-different from the mantra. The Guru is also meditated upon as being non-different from the mantra. So in this case, we can worship the Supreme Lord externally in a yantra. A yantra is this type of the word yantra means machine, it means device, but it also can mean this flat 2-dimensional exhibition of geometric patterns and also mantras on inscribed on copper or on some other thing, paper or even metals, different metals. So the yantra can also be 3-dimensional. When it's 3-dimensional, we don't call it a yantra. We can call it a yantra also, but a 3-dimensional yantra, and it comes up in the middle, and it's called a meru. The word Meru means mountain. Meru, there's a specific mountain called Meru, but the word Meru in itself can be used to mean mountain. So if we see a yantra which is in 3 dimensions and looks like a little bit like a mountain, even though the Meru mountain is supposed to be wider at the top and smaller at the bottom, these Merus, if somebody says to me a Sri Meru, it's a Sri yantra which has been made into a mountain shape, in a 3-dimensional shape. So that's called a Meru. So that's just another type of yantra. By the way, the most common yantra is the Sri yantra, which is 13 intersecting triangles without, and it may or may not have mantras on it. Just the pattern itself is important and can be worshipped as Durga, Devi, or Lakshmi, Sri Devi. So that is a very common yantra, is the Sri yantra. Okay, so then we have Standila. Now, Standila, normally what it means is a fire altar. It means 3-tiered. There can be different shapes. Normally, it can be a square shape with 3 tiers, 3 steps, and inside it can be either above ground level or below ground level or equal to the ground level. There are different directions on making these Standilas. And in fact, in Hari Bhakti Vilasa, in the second Vilas, there was an explanation of this, of how to make the Standila for doing the fire ceremony, for doing the initiation. So in other books, it doesn't really, there's not much more in Hari Bhakti Vilasa about how to do fire worship, how to do fire sacrifices or in Standilas. Because whenever we get to a point where it says to do that, in Hari Bhakti Vilasa, it says, go see the part that I put in about doing the initiation ceremony in chapter 2. So here the point is being made that the Lord himself can be worshipped in the fire. So just to recap, in a shalagram, in a mantra, in a yantra, in the fire, in the fire sacrifice, the Lord is actually present in the fire, or is called to, or is invoked to be present in the fire. In all these places, except in the shalagram, the Lord has to be invoked. He has to be called there. Although he's everywhere and he's all pervasive, still we have to chant some prayers. We have to do some rituals in order to pray to him to respond to us, to accept our worship through that form, and to reciprocate with us. Right? To accept our worship, whether it's good or bad, or whether we make mistakes or whether we don't, he should accept our. So he should come and be within, in the mantra, in the yantra, in the standila, in the fire, in the diagram, and he should be there. Even a mandala, which is another more extensive type of diagram, like a yantra, it's also 2-dimensional, but it also may include many different deities on a mandala, whereas a yantra is normally one deity. And the mandala may represent the whole universe. So it may be a representation of the macrocosm in a microcosm. Okay, so then we have pratima. Pratima is the next. Pratima adi. Okay, so we have this adi word. Adi means etc. So it means that there are other places which we can worship the Lord, and we're going to learn about those in the next verses. But the pratima, normally when people say murti or bimba, they mean a 3-dimensional form in which the Lord is invoked, and which we do the prana pratishta, we do the enlivening of the Lord's senses after we invoke him, and then he reciprocates and accepts our worship and gives us blessings through that medium. So that can also be called a pratima. A pratima means an image. And the pratima can be of different types. It can also be 3-dimensional. It can also be 2-dimensional. Sometimes we see a figure of a deity, which is 2-dimensional. We can call it a picture, or we can call it a painting. Sometimes they have these paintings which are worshipped externally, or a picture. Some people, they put on their altar, they don't have a deity, the 3-dimensional deity, so they put a 2-dimensional deity there. They put a picture. Picture is also a form of the Lord. It's also a type of murti. It's also what we call also a pratima. Sometimes when we have this pot we have a sort of a neutral body, a pot with water in it, and with decorated in certain ways with a coconut in the top and leaves coming out of the mango leaves coming out of it. That is sort of a blank deity, a blank type of or neutral type of deity that in which we can call different deities. For example, if we're doing the Punyaharachanam ceremony and we invoke Varuna, right, the god of waters, to come and to be present in the water of the pot, and we worship the pot just like a form of Varuna, and the coconut representing his head, the leaves representing his 2 arms, 2 legs, and genitals, the body of the pot representing his body, the strings wrapped on around the pot representing his nerves. We might put different spices and jewels and different things inside the water of the pot. The water of the pot represents his blood. The different things that are put inside represents the different organs in his body. So these are all different ways. These are different ways that we can worship a personality by calling them into a physical form. Sometimes this word pratima is used for small copper or silver plates with an actual form of the particular devata or deity embossed on that piece of metal. What we do with that is we can either worship it externally, or we can take that and we can put it inside the water of the pot, and it can be used again in another puja or something like that. So somebody might have a small Varuna or a small Lakshmi or a small Krishna or something, and they put it inside the pot, and it might be embossed on anything from aluminum to aluminium or even silver. Most commonly, it's silver or gold, and put inside the pot. Some auspicious metal, right? So these are the places. So again, it says here, one should worship Lord Hari in the form of Shalagam Shila, as a mantra, as a yantra, as a sanctified fire altar, as a deity, pratima, etc. But then it says here, Kevale Natu Bhutale, on the ground. One should never worship him on the ground, like that. So just now, although it says this here, there are times when we would worship the Lord on the ground. For instance, when we do the Mitsangaharanam, or the collecting of earth, we have to worship the Lord Varaha and his consort, the goddess of the earth. And so very often when we do these architectural type rituals, where we have to lay the foundation of a building or a temple or a house, we would be digging in the earth, and we have to take permission from the earth before we dig in the earth. So we have to worship the goddess of the earth. And of course, the consort of the goddess of the earth is the Lord, the Supreme Lord, Lord Varaha, or Lord Vishnu. So Vishnu has these different consorts, Sri Devi, but also Bhumi Devi, Bhudevi, the goddess of the earth. So when it says here, don't worship on the earth itself is worshipable. And therefore we can also invoke the goddess of the earth in a patch of earth, in a particular patch of earth, and also invoke the Lord Varaha on the earth. But in that case, what we normally do is we make a type of mandala or a type of yantra on the earth. We make with colored rice or colored flowers. We show colored rice flour or some decoration on the ground to indicate Lord Varaha, to indicate Bhumi Devi, and then we invoke Lord Varaha and Bhumi Devi in those, and then we worship. So in that case, we will be worshiping on the ground, but that will be an exception. So here's a rule: we don't normally take the deity in any form or a shalagam and put it on the ground, because that's considered offensive. That's considered not to be correct. The ground is normally considered to be dirty, although I'm sure that there are many pure stretches of ground. Still, we should not worship the Lord on the ground. There are some other things that come to mind that might be exceptions, like if we were going to the Govardhan hill, or we were going to some other sacred hill. In Chitrakoot, there's also a hill which is sacred to Lord Rama. In the Govardhan hill is, of course, sacred to Lord Krishna and is considered to be non-different from Lord Krishna. The Chitrakoot hill also considered to be non-different from Lord Rama. So people people, or there's some hills in Ahobilam which are considered to be auspicious or non-different from Lord Narasimha. So if we go to that place, we might worship the mountain, or there's a place in South India in Tamil Nadu called Arunachala, and the mountain itself there is considered to be an incarnation of Lord Narasimha. So in that case, we would actually be worshipping the earth, or we would be worshipping a mountain, or we would be worshipping. Another thing that springs to mind is that the Naimisharanya is a forest, and that the forest itself is considered to be an incarnation of the Lord. So in that case, we would be worshipping the forest. So there are some exceptions to this rule of not worshipping on the ground. I'm sorry to go on with all the exceptions, but when I see a rule here, I want to also mention the exceptions. So very often when we get a rule in Shastra, there's also some exceptions that we have to note. So continuing on with text 252 and 256, we're going to learn about more places that we can worship the Lord. So in the actual Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, in the 11th canto, 11th chapter, 42nd to 46th verse, there's a conversation between Uddhava and Lord Krishna, where it's stated some other places where we can worship the Lord. So, O saintly Uddhava, please know that you may worship me in the sun. So, for instance, in Sandhya Vandanam, when we chant the Gayatri mantra, we meditate upon Lord Narayana, Lord Surya Narayana in the sun. Deya Sarasivati Mandala Madhyavarti Narayana Sarasijasana Sani Vistakiyurvan Makarakundalan Kiriti Hari Hiramai Vapurtita Sankha Chakraha. He holds the Sankha Chakra, he has shark earrings, and he's situated there within the sun. That is Surya Narayana. So when we're chanting the Gayatri mantra, we're meditating upon that Supreme Lord, who is what we call Pratyaksha Devata, the God that we can see in the sky, because without the sun, no life could exist. So we owe a lot to the Supreme Lord in the sun for enthusing us in our meditation, and also for giving us light and life and everything in this world. So there are some ways we can worship the Lord in the sun. There's also the system of Surya Namaskaram. Surya Namaskaram, if there's a section of Taittiriya Krishna Yajurvedam called Arunam. And Arunam is a part of the Taittiriya Aranyaka. And it specifically is, I think there's 138 verses which are in praise of the sun. And some people, what they do is they offer obeisances, or Surya Namaskara, right? This is a famous thing in yoga, that people do the Surya Namaskara. It's a set of exercises or asanas or poses in yoga, paying obeisances to the sun. There's a short way of doing it, a long way of doing it. The short way of doing it can be done with mantra or without mantra. The long way of doing it is done by chanting the Taittiriya Aranyaka section, the first section of Taittiriya Aranyaka, which is called Arunam. And at 138 intervals, you prostrate, saying Om Namo Narayanaya after the verse that you've chanted. So this is also considered to be very good for health, and some people do it in South India. I've got some video of somebody doing it, actually, if anybody's interested in seeing that. So we can worship the Lord in the sun. And there's a couple of different ways of doing it. There's some, we do it every day during Gayatri Japa, but also occasionally we can do these Surya Namaskaras. They're good for health. And we can also chant the Arunam, which is worshiping the Lord, is the Vedic mantras for worshiping the Lord in the sun. It's also possible that we do what is called Navagraha Puja. Navagraha Puja means Nava means 9, and Graha means planets or influences. So there are 9 astrological or astronomical bodies that have influence upon us, have very great influence upon us in this material world, and they have different forms in the universe, and they also have different devatas or demigods who are in charge of them, but they also have what we call Adi Devatas and Pratyadi Devatas. They also have forms of the Supreme Lord who are giving the power to that particular Devata, that particular demigod, to give us the influence, to influence us in particular ways. And we have a very short sloka in Sanskrit, which names all the 9 planets. That is Adityaya to Somaya, Mangalaya Budaya cha, Guru Shukra Shanebhyascha, Rahave Ketave Namaha. This is all 9 planets in one short sloka, Anustup sloka. So Adityaya, the sun, Adityaya to Somaya, the moon, and it's in the same order as we have in the West. If we note the days of the week, when we know the order of the planets. So the traditional order of the planets are coming Sunday first. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right, are equal to Sunday is the sun, Monday is the moon, Tuesday is Mars, Wednesday is Venus. Sorry, Wednesday is Mercury. Thursday is Jupiter. Friday is Venus. Saturday is Saturn. Okay, so these are the these are 7 planets, and then there in astrology there is Rahu and Ketu. Rahu is considered to be in Chinese astrology, they call it dragon's head and dragon's tail. In Vedic astrology and Vedic understanding, there was a demon, and the demon drank the elixir after the churning of the ocean of milk, so he became eternal. He became ever living, but unfortunately, the Supreme Lord came as Mohini, in the female form of Mohini, and she, with her chakra, cut his head off. So the demon is separated because he's eternal. He's still living, and he has the head. He has a head and he has a tail. So his head part and his body part are separated, but they're still living. The head part is called Rahu, and the body part is called Ketu, and they're always on the opposite sides of the ecliptic or the opposite sides of the astrological plane.
Swami,
okay, so these are also added to the 7 planets that we just talked about.
Swami, this shloka that you mentioned.
Yep.
Do you know the source?
Okay, so there are slokas to be chanted. There are ordinary slokas and there are Vedic mantras. So with everything, we're going to understand that worship can be done with Vedic mantras and worship can be done with non-Vedic mantras. So these are non-Vedic mantras for Navagraha Puja, and there are Vedic mantras for Navagraha Puja. So the non-Vedic mantras, there's a stotram, a Navagraha stotram, and each verse, it's supposed to be written by Vedavyas. Each verse, it may be coming in one Purana or something. We have to look up the source. Exactly the source I don't know, but we can find out. And it starts off with the sun, and it has one verse for each. And sometimes this verse is either given at the beginning or the end. So this is a very, if you want to do a very quick Navagraha Puja, you can just worship them all together, all the 9 influences, all the 9 planets together, by saying this one verse and then by offering upacharas, right, to each of the planets. My point is that there is also more Vedic mantras. There are also Vedic mantras for worshiping each planet. And a lot of times when people worship the planets, what they do is they say, Adidevata Pratyadidevata Sahitaya Bhagavate Suryaya Namaha. You know, so they say Adidevata, there's an Adidevata, there's an original Devata, there's a Pratyadidevata, which is another type of Devata. Then there's the Sahitaya. Sahitaya means along with Bhagavan, along with the Supreme Lord, and then Suryaya Namaha, Somaya Namaha, Angarakaya Namaha, whatever it is, whatever planet we're worshipping. So there are different methods of doing Navagraha Puja. I have made a PDF and put it out there, explaining the different methods of which different sampradayas use for doing Navagraha Puja. Whenever you go into a Sri Vaishnava temple, by the way, you will never see Navagrahas. There may be 1 or 2 exceptions to temples like that, Dividesha temples, but normally we don't see Navagraha or 9 planetary deities in Sri Vaishnava temples. You do see them in Madhva Sampradaya and in other Vaishnava Sampradaya temples. That's because specifically Sri Vaishnavas are a little bit wary about worshipping any Devata apart from the Supreme Lord. But in other sampradayas, Navagraha Puja is mentioned. In Hari Bhakti Vilasa, it's mentioned. In Madhva Sampradaya, they do it. So they have sometimes in the temples they have these Navagraha Pitams where they have 9 deities standing in different directions of the forms of the different 9 planets. Now, the way that those planets are worshipped is different also according to the different sampradayas. Some people, of course, will be using Vedic mantras. Some people will be using Puranic mantras or classical Sanskrit mantras. Some people will be worshipping the inner deity, the inner super soul of that deity. So they won't be worshipping Mars or the Devata or the demigod of Mars, but they will be worshipping Angarika, but they will actually be worshipping the super soul within Mars, or they will the Supreme Lord, Sriman Narayana, as super soul within Mars. Other people look at it as being like these demigods are like the limbs of the Supreme Lord, and we worshipping a different limb of the Supreme Lord. So there are different concepts according to the doctrines, the philosophical doctrines of the different sampradayas as to how to worship the Navagrahas. Of course, the Smartas and the Advaitins, the Mayavadis, the people who are monists, they will just worship the demigod of each particular planet. But there are also other deities that have to do with each planet too. For instance, when you're chanting the Arunam which is the first part of the Saitiriya Aranyaka to Surya, okay, we mentioned Chaya Suvachanam. We mentioned Chaya, who is the wife of Surya. Surya is the sun, so he represents light. His wife is shadow. She's shadow. So even when we go outside, we see when the sun shines on something, behind that thing there is a shadow. So always where there's light, there's shadow. So because shadow is always with light, shadow is considered the wife of light. So Surya, so when we offer obeisances to Surya Narayana, we also offer obeisances to his wife Chaya. So like that. So there are some, it depends on how you want to. Also, we have some books, like in the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, have this book called Satkriya Sar Deepika, which is ascribed to Gopal Bhatta Goswami. We don't actually know the source of this book, and it suggests, like the Sri Vaishnavas, that we should not worship the Navagrahas. It suggests another thing to worship. It suggests worshiping what I call the Nava Yogendras, which are 9 sages mentioned in the Bhagavatam. So instead of worshiping the Navagrahas. So there are different methods of doing Navagraha Puja. There are, and we should go according to, as Hari Bhakti Vilasa is so fond of saying, you follow the system of your sampradaya, whatever your sampradaya is, and the way that it's being taught by your lineage, and you do that. So anyhow, here, this all came about by this one word that you can worship me in the sun. Okay, so that's mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Krishna says you worship me in the sun. But for more details about Navagraha Puja, we should probably wait until we come to a section where it actually mentions it, which will come much later in the book. But I'm just mentioning it here offhand. We don't need to get into the all the nitty gritty or all the details of Navagraha Puja right here, because it'll come later like that. So okay, so then it says fire. That's already been dealt with in the part about doing the initiation ceremony, how to offer the grains and the ghee and the different items into the fire, and that will also be explained more in detail when we come to the 17th Vilasa, where it talks about Puruscharya or Puruscharana, the process of perfecting the mantra, the Diksha mantra, which is the Gopal mantra, and that will describe different items that we have to put into the fire. So similarly, in the 19th Vilasa, which concerns installation, which is the longest Vilasa, over 1,000 slokas, there are details in there about different things to be offered into the fire also. So we'll leave all those details until we come to that section. Then in the Brahmanas, so Brahmanas, a Brahmana, okay, so in the Varnashram system, there are different classes. These classes are very natural. They have come to be understood as castes in India according to birth, but we know from Vedic texts like the Vajrasutrika Upanishad that Brahmanism is not really Brahmanness is not really based on birth. But sometimes today, and in some social scriptures like the Manusmriti and other Smriti Shastras, it is mentioned that it can be understood by birth because we have a certain body because of our past karma. So birth is a somewhat important factor in some scriptures. For other scriptures, it's not important. So normally there are some Vaishnavas who place more or less importance upon birth in a particular family. Normally in Vaishnavism, we don't judge a Vaishnava by his low birth or high birth in a particular caste or class of human beings. The whole class system comes originally from the Vedas, from the Purusha Sukta. The verses, Brahmanosya Mahamasid, Bahu Rajanyakitaha, Uru Tarashyad Vaishaha, Padbyam Sudro Ajayata. So the Brahmans, if we consider society or the whole of creation to be like a body, the Brahmins are the head, the intellectuals or the intelligentsia are the head, right, for obvious reasons, right? And the Kshatriyas or the administrative or military class are the hands, which do the work and the fighting, protect the body, right? The Vaishyas or the businessmen or the entrepreneurs, right, are or the farmers, right? The people who the producers of things for the body is the stomach, which produces energy for the whole body. After we put food in the stomach, it produces energy for the whole body to work. So they support the whole of society. And then the Sudras are the feet or the workers in society who assist the other classes, and they allow the body to move here and there like that. So all of these parts of the body are important, of the social body also. But specifically, the Brahmanas are considered to be a form of the Lord. And therefore, the Brahmanas are also worshipped. For instance, in the Shraddha ceremony, we call 3 Brahmins to come. One of them takes the place of Vishnu. One of them takes the place of the Ashwini Kumars. Right? One of them takes the place of the Pitris, of the ancestors. And we feed those Brahmins. And through feeding those Brahmins, we satisfy Vishnu and the Ashwini Kumars and the Pitris, the forefathers, the ancestors. Similarly, there's another thing called Hiranya Shraddha. So Hiranya Shraddha, the word Shraddha means faith, but Shraddha in the sense of a ritual is what we call it's an apara karma. Karma means it's a different ritual, right? So there are purva karmas and there are apara karmas. So purva karmas deal with all the samskaras, all the different rituals, purificatory rituals that we do from birth to death of a person. After during the funeral and after the funeral, there are other ceremonies to be done for that person to assist that person to the next life. So those are called apara karmas. So in those apara karmas, we tend to worship Brahmins and invoke these different devatas to be situated in the Brahman and to be worshipped through the Brahman. So similarly, just like Guru Puja, when we worship the Supreme Lord within the body of the Guru. So we think of the Guru or the teacher as being a representative of the Supreme Lord, and therefore we can offer worship to him as well, like that. Srila Prabhupada used to give the example of the viceroy, that when Britain had a great empire, it also included India, and there was a man that was the representative of the King of England, the King of England was also considered to be the Emperor of India, and so he sent his representative there, and his representative in India, who ruled India for him, because he couldn't personally be there, he was in England, would be called the viceroy. So all honors would be given to the viceroy in India, just the same as if the king were personally present or the emperor was personally present. So the worship of the Brahmanas is, again, a way of worshiping the Supreme Lord, right? So there's this thing called Hiranya Shraddha, where if you can't do a particular ritual, what you do is you donate gold. Hiranya means gold, right? We have this Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha. These demons were interested in gold. So Hiranya, the word Hiranya in Sanskrit means gold. So there are some people who they give gold to the Brahmins, right? In lieu of doing a particular ceremony that is called Hiranya Shraddha, a particular apara karma. So they can also give other things. There are, they can give all sorts of useful things to the Brahmins, like umbrellas and shoes and food and grains and all sorts of pots and things that they might need. So we can give that to the Brahmins. This tradition is also carried over into Buddhism, where you see, if you go to Asia and go to any Asian country in the morning, you'll see Buddhist monks walking around the streets with begging bowls, and people are putting food, or they're giving. You can even go to a puja shop in places like Thailand or Cambodia. You go to a puja shop, and they will have buckets which are shrink wrapped, and they're full of items to give to a monk, to donate to a monk, an umbrella and some shoes and toothpaste, toothbrush, and hair. He doesn't have any hair, but they shave the head. But different things that he might use, like that. So what the people do is they buy that whole thing and they just give it to a monk, like that, and they get benefit from doing that. So similarly, in the Vedic civilization, people would donate to Brahmins, or they would even worship Brahmins with ritual worship. So here we're talking about external ritual worship. Where can we worship the Lord? In an external way. So we can worship the Lord in any person, actually, because the Lord is within the heart of everybody. So we can think of the Lord in the heart of anybody, and we can worship that person. In the Gaudiya tradition, in the Shraddha ceremony of Srinivasa of the Panchatattva, he had a Shraddha ceremony for his father, for his parents, like that. And he invited Haridas Thakur, who was born in a Muslim family, and worshipped him because he's a great devotee, like that. So here, when it says Brahmanas, that it may be stated in the Puranas, like Bhagavad Purana, that we should worship Brahmanas. But in fact, the Vaishnava is also considered to be just as great or greater than a Brahmana. So we don't need to necessarily worship caste Brahmanas or even, Vaishnava Brahmanas, but we can also worship any Vaishnava as a representative of the Supreme Lord, because the Supreme Lord is within his heart. So when it says here Brahmanas, it can also mean Vaishnavas. So cows can also be worshipped. Cows is a very auspicious animal. And in fact, there are other animals which can be worshipped too. Elephants, horses. There are many auspicious animals, many auspicious animals which can be worshipped. Specifically, though, the cow is considered very dear to Lord Krishna, and also very dear to Vaishnavas in general, and Hindus in general, because the cow is a very useful animal, and we use all of different products of the cow, right? We use the cow dung, we use the cow urine for medicines, and for cow dung for disinfectant medicines from cow urine. We use the milk to make milk, ghee, yogurt, butter, all these different items from the milk, curd. We even when the cow dies, we use the horns, we use the skin of the cow. We can make redundums, we can make different items like that after the cow passes away naturally. So the cow is providing all these things for us, and therefore one of the seven mothers is called the cow. The cow is considered like a mother, because the mother gives milk. If you drink milk from a lady, she's your mother, right? So if you drink milk from a cow, then the cow is just like your mother. So the cow is considered like a mother, so therefore the cow is sacred to us. And of course, it's going to be mentioned here in Hari Bhakti Vilasa. It'll mention about different types of milk also, and it'll mention, I think, so there's buffalo milk, and there's goat milk, and there's other types of milk which is available also in the West, maybe not so much in India. In India, of course, buffalo milk, but and these are considered second class. The first class milk is considered to be from the cow. So even there are different types of cows milk. There's the Western cows and there's the Indian cows, but this is all getting too much detail. The idea is the cow is sacred. There's also a deity or devata called Karmadenu, and Karmadenu is a wish fulfilling cow. And according to the Bhagavatam, Kamadenu accompanied Indra. Indra had created a big rainstorm in Gokul because Krishna had told his father not to worship Indra in the annual sacrifice, but to use all of that food and provisions to worship Govardhan Hill. So this was something that angered Indra, the devata Indra, and he rained down rain on the inhabitants of Gokula, and Krishna did the leela of lifting up the Govardhan Hill as an umbrella for 7 days. So after Indra finally realized that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and therefore he had to give up trying to wash away all the inhabitants of Gokul, he came and he paid his respects to Krishna, and he also brought with him this Kamadenu. So this Kamadenu is also called, the other name for Kamadenu is Surabhi cow. So he brought this Surabhi cow or Kamadenu, and it's described in the Bhagavatam. There's only one mention in the verse of Bhagavatam of Goloka. What does Goloka mean? The word loka means locality or location, and it could also mean a planet, let's say. And go means cow. Go can mean other things too, but Goloka can be very simply translated as cow planet. So this cow, Surabhi or Kamadenu, comes from a planet in this material world called Goloka, which is mentioned in the Bhagavatam. You can look it up. So this is a quote from the Bhagavatam. So it mentions about the worship of the cows. In this case, in this story, the cow came along with Indra to worship Krishna, and the milk from the cow was used to bathe Lord Krishna, which is a respectful thing to do. So they did an abhishekam, or a special ritual bathing of Lord Krishna with the milk from the Surabhi cow. This is a pastime in the Bhagavatam. Okay, so the Kamadenu cow is also considered in Vaishnavism and Hinduism to be the embodiment of different other devatas. So if we want to worship all the different demigods, we can actually worship the Kamadenu, and different parts of the cow's body are considered to be different demigods. So you can look it up and you can see. We don't really need to go into it. Anyway, the point is, the cow also has a super soul within the cow, and therefore we can also worship the cow. The cow is specifically mentioned here. I'm not saying that you can't worship other animals, you can, but here specifically the cow is considered a very sattvic, a very pure animal in the mode of goodness, and it can be worshipped as a Supreme Lord. Right? We can invoke the Supreme Lord. He's there anyway. He's there in everything, but in specific, he says in the scriptures, so the Supreme Lord's everywhere. So somebody will say, well, okay, why do we specifically say these particular places we can worship God? Why don't we just say we can worship God anywhere? So I have a chair in my room, right? Why don't I worship God in the chair? God's definitely in the chair. Lord Vishnu is all pervasive, and therefore Lord Krishna is within every atom, and therefore he's in the atoms of that chair. So why don't I just worship Lord Krishna in that chair? The reason is because we do worship, we do ritualistic worship, we do any of our activities according to the description and the rules and regulations of the scriptures, right? There's a saying, Shruti Shmiti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidim Vina. Vina means without, right? So without following the rules and regulations of the scriptures, the worship is considered not correct. We should follow those rules and regulations. Now, there are some exceptions to that too. For instance, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the chanting of Harinam, of the holy names, is smarane na kalaha. There's no rules and regulations, no time or place or circumstance that has to be correct for us to chant the holy names of God. So we can always chant the holy names of God. So that's one type of ritual, one religious function that we can do without worrying about any particular time, place, or circumstance. Whereas here we're talking about specifically worshiping in an iconic form, in an external form, the Supreme Lord, right? And this has certain rules and regulations in the scriptures. So the rules and regulations never mention in the scriptures that I can worship in a chair. They never mention that I can worship in a block of wood or something like that. It has to be formed in a certain way, right? And we're going to find out. The 18th Vilasa of Hari Bhakti Vilasa is going to explain to us how to make these different deities, how to make these different icons that can then be where we can then reciprocate with God. We can call God to be present and reciprocate with us our external worship. So we should follow the tenets of the scripture. We should follow the rules and regulations of the scripture when we do this. Shruti, Shmriti, Purana, Pancharatra. And it's given in a certain order too. Shruti comes first, Shmriti, Purana, Pancharatra. So there are these different, as I was discussing also yesterday with you, that there are these different forms of worship, Vedic worship and Puranic worship and Pancharatric worship, and they're all slightly different. Okay. So we'll find out some more about that probably in Hari Bhakti Vilasa, and we can also look in some other places for some quotes about when it's important to use Vedic procedures or Puranic procedures or Pancharatric procedures. Okay, so in the cows. Now we come Vaishnavas, in the Vaishnavas, right? So I mentioned that before when we were talking about Brahmanas. We can also worship in the Vaishnavas. So we can worship in the Brahmins, the cows, the Vaishnavas. In the sky, how do we worship the Lord in the sky? I'm a little bit of a loss to exactly say how the Lord can be worshipped in the sky, but it's also possible to worship. If it means outer space, there's meditation on the universal form of the Lord, the Shishumara Chakra, which is a particular constellation that looks either like a dolphin or a scorpion, depending upon the description in the Shastra, which can also be worshipped, right? Worship in wind. Worship in the wind, I'm not sure exactly how that's done either. Worship in water. Sometimes some water there's worship that goes on of the Lord in water. Worship in the earth. Now, we just had previously we had the rule. Don't worship the Lord never worship the Lord on the ground. Here we have in the very next statement, a scriptural statement from the Bhagavatam saying you can worship the Lord in the earth, right? So just as I said, for many times when there's a rule, there'll be also an exception given. So in the very next section, Prabhupada has given us an exception to that previous rule. And then the individual soul, in the individual soul. So there are different concepts of this within different sampradayas and different traditions and lineages, right? Some people see the super soul as being separate from the soul and seated within the mind or within the heart, like two birds in a tree, right? So in the Upanishads, there's an analogy given of the body as a tree, like a tree with green leaves, and then there are these two green birds were sitting in the tree, and we can hear them. They do different things, but we can't. It's very difficult to see them because they're also the same color as the leaves of the tree, green birds. So we look at the tree and we think, oh, there's some activity going on there, but we can't quite see the birds. So in this analogy, the super soul and the soul are two separate, distinct entities like this. However, there are some yogis who do meditate upon the soul and the super soul within the body, and they see them more as one thing, right? Now, this can be explained in different ways. Somebody says that he just didn't see the super soul. He saw only the soul, or he only saw the super soul. The super soul was perhaps so effulgent that he couldn't see the little tiny soul next to it, because obviously the super soul is greater than the soul. And also another example would be the doctrine that some Vaishnavas have, that the super soul actually pervades everything, pervades every atom. And some people say that the super soul, like the northern school of Sri Vaishnavism, the Vadagalais, They say that the super soul pervades the soul itself. So there are some arguments. There are some arguments for this and some arguments against this. I don't really want to go into it in detail. But for instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says the soul cannot be cut. So it's indivisible. So normally, when we say something is indivisible, it can't be cut. There can't be pieces of it. It means that there's nothing also inside it. It is through and through soul. But the Northern School of Sri Vaishnavism and the Vadagalais, they believe that the super soul pervades not only every atom. See, if you say an atom is, they used to say before atomic fission and before the nuclear age, they used to say that atom, like my parents grew up and they went to school and they were taught atomic theory, that the atom is the smallest thing and it can't be broken. It's indivisible, like the soul. And then somebody came along and they split the atom and they decided that that was wrong. So the point here is that some people believe that the soul itself is impermeated, but can be the super soul can be within the soul. If the super soul we know is in the body, but some people say the super soul also pervades the soul itself. If it can pervade an atom, which is indestructible and indivisible, then why can't it also pervade the soul? Right? So this is one theory. This is one Vaishnava theory. Other theories are that the soul and super soul are separate and they're apart like that. So can we worship the Supreme Lord in the individual soul? Yes, we can. In fact, as part of doing this puja, part of doing this worship, this external worship, the preparation for this is the Bhuta Shuddhi, where we consider the body to be now made up of spiritual elements. And although we meditate upon the soul and super soul differently, right, we can worship within now exactly the word here for individual soul is not clear. We could look in the Sanskrit and we could see exactly what it meant. So we have Surya in sun, Havisha Agnau in the fire, right? In the Vaishnava, right? In the heart, right? In the heart, right? Meditation in the heart. Hridi, K, in space. Vayu means air. I'm not sure exactly, but maybe Atmanam, Atmani, Atmanam and Atmani mean like that in the Atma. Now the word Atma can also mean body, right? So we don't know if the translation here is correct, right? If the word Atmanam or the Atma of Atmanam, whether it means here the body or the soul. But anyway, here is translated as the soul. It could mean the body, worship in a body. There's a super soul. Or it could mean the soul. Even within the soul, we can imagine that there's a super soul, according to some people's philosophy. Okay, so now continuing on, and all living entities, all living beings. So sometimes people have these sayings. Prabhupada wasn't too happy with these sayings, but they in India sometimes they say Jana Seva, Janardana Seva. If Seva means to serve, if I serve the people, I also serve God. Service to man is service to God, like that. I would put it the other way around. Service to God is also service to man, to mankind. So sometimes we would worship different living beings and worship them as the Supreme Lord. Give them respect as if they are the Supreme Lord. So it's possible. The king, for instance, the king in Vedic civilization is considered to be Rajarshi. He's considered to be a representative of God. And even up until very recently, the king of Nepal, the king of Thailand, the kings in India were considered to be incarnations of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So especially the king of Nepal was considered to be an incarnation of Vishnu. The king of Thailand was considered to be an incarnation of Rama. In fact, all of the kings of Thailand are called have these titles as well as their name. They also have the title Rama 1, Rama 2, Rama 3, Rama 4. If you go to Thailand today, you'll go on the highway. It'll be Rama 9 highway. It'll be named after the king. So the king and the kings in Thailand lived in a place called Ayutthaya, which is just simply the Thai way of saying Ayodhya. In India, we have Ayodhya, which was the capital of Lord Rama. In Thailand, we have Ayutthaya, which is the capital of the king of Thailand, who is considered to be an incarnation of Rama. So in different living entities, it's possible to worship the Supreme Lord also. So these are some, according to the Bhagavatam, these are some places which we can worship the Supreme Lord. Sorry to go into such extent about that, but there are these different places. Okay, so now let's continue on and we'll find out about some more places. So this may give us some more details of how exactly we worship those in those different forms, because it's not that the same type of worship will be there for all the forms. Maybe slightly different. My dear Uddhava, one should worship me within the sun by chanting selected Vedic mantras. I mentioned the first part of the Taittiriya Aranyaka, the Aruna prayers, and by performing worship and offering obeisances, right? So by doing the namaskaras, right? So this is mentioned in the Bhagavatam. This is something that we can do. So one may worship me within fire by offering oblations of ghee, right? And we'll find out maybe some other grains and some other things. One may worship me amongst the Brahmanas by respectfully receiving them as guests, even if they're uninvited, right? One may worship me within cows by offering grass and other suitable grains and paraphernalia for the pleasure and health of the cows. And one may worship me within the Vaishnavas by offering loving friendship to them and honoring them in all respects. Through steady meditation, I am worshipped within the inner space of the heart. All right, so this was a reference to space, I guess, but when it said sky, it meant space, or here it's being interpreted as space in the heart. And within air, one can worship me as the prana or the life air, right? So for instance, I forgot to mention, but remember we were talking about eating. When we do the Brahminical form of eating, we're offering the Agnihotra to the fire of digestion, and it's called the Prana Agnihotra. So Agnihotra is a form of sacrifice, a Vedic sacrifice, to the pranas, or the 5 major life airs. There are actually 10 life airs within the body, but these 5 are the major ones, which have, so prana, apana, vyana, udana, and samana. And we offer, at the beginning of each major meal, we offer oblations into them and meditate upon them. This is a way of worshipping prana, of the Lord in prana. And in fact, sometimes in the Upanishads, when we read the Upanishads, the word prana can actually mean Brahman, the Supreme Brahman, Sriman Narayana. It is another word of, in fact, it comes in Vishnu Sahasranam, the 1,000 names of Vishnu, the word prana. So prana can be a name of God also. And by worshipping the pranas, we're also worshipping the Supreme Lord. That should be our meditation when eating, when taking the food. The life air, prana, the life air. So there's these different life airs, is chief among the elements. I worship within water by offering water itself. Okay, so sometimes we see people in India they're standing in a river and they're offering palmfuls of water back into the river. What they're doing is they're actually perhaps offering water as tarpana or as in Surya Argya in their Sandhya Vandanam. We can use water. We can use water to worship water itself. Among other elements, such as flowers, tulsi leaves, we can also offer into water. Right, and one may worship me within the earth by proper application of confidential seed mantras. So bija mantras. So that's an interesting translation here. I'm not exactly sure if that's coming from some sort of commentary by an acharya, but a seed mantra usually doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the earth. There is a seed mantra, lam, which has to do with the earth, but the element earth. But specifically, I've not heard of this using bija mantras to worship the earth. But anyhow, bija mantras are part of tantric forms of worship, so we accept that. One may worship me within the living entity by offering food and other enjoyable substances. One may worship me within all living entities by seeing the super soul within all of them, thus maintaining equal vision, as it says in Bhagavad Gita. Pandita samadarshanaha, an intelligent person, a knowledgeable person, sees equality amongst all, spiritual equality amongst all living beings. So obviously living beings have different bodies, but they are equal spiritually because the Supreme Lord and the soul resides within each one of them as Atma and Paramatman, and therefore on that level they are equal. Thus, in the previously mentioned places of worship, and according to the processes I have described, one should meditate upon me, my peaceful transcendental form with 4 arms holding a conch shell, Sudarshana discus, right, club and lotus flower. In this way, one should worship me with fixed attention. So here in the Bhagavatam, it's specifically saying that the meditation should be, and let's look at the Sanskrit, the meditation should be on my form, Madrupam, right, with Shankha Chakra Gadam Bhujai, right, with the conch, the chakra, the discus, and the mace, like that. Didn't actually mention the name for lotus. No, Ambuja means lotus. Excuse me. Gada is his mace, and Ambuja is, so these 4 items in the 4 hands, yuktam, together, right, in 4 hands, in peaceful, right, and that's the meditation that is suggested in the Bhagavatam within all living beings, right, that we meditate upon the Lord within all living beings as having the 4 hands and things like that. Of course, here we're specifically not exactly following the way it says in the Bhagavatam, but we're following the system we're worshiping Lord Krishna. So instead of seeing the 4-handed Lord within the heart as the super soul, we will see a 2-handed form of Lord Krishna, because we're going to be worshiping Lord Krishna externally. And so now we're going to be talking about murtis, about different forms of deities. Good. Okay, so do we have any questions about all the different places? Today, basically, we're talking about all the different places we can worship the Lord, all the different sthanas.